Mammoths. Millions of these lovely furry creatures used to peacefully live on the beautiful planet Earth. And since childhood we are conditioned to believe by the mass media and also the history textbooks that this was some really many thousands of years ago. With great confidence, those sources assure us that the mammoths had died all of a sudden, roughly around some 10,000 years ago, and the last few who survived died shortly afterwards. But what are these claims based on? Since the answer to this question may be quite surprising to quite a few of my listeners, I will give the answer towards the end, after providing a few facts about the mammoths so that you can make your own conclusions. It is not a secret that the mammoths died in some sort of terrible catastrophic event. They are found in large numbers, entangled in one single mass, together with tropical plants and clay and anything else you could find on the surface of the earth. Such findings are abundant both in the northern parts of Europe and Asia and also North America. And most definitely everything was frozen on the spot very quickly, did not have time to decompose at all. And in some cases, when such a mass, a mammoth graveyard, starts melting nowadays, it stings unbearably at long distances. Due to the instant freezing, amazingly well preserved mammoths are found. They froze literally on the spot. They didn't even have time to swallow the tropic greenery they were munching on. It got frozen in their mouths and their throats. Even milk was still found in the tummy of the babies. This is one of the small baby mammoths that they tested thoroughly. Besides milk and tropical plants, they could also establish the cause of its death. And the cause was inhaling liquid mud. So the event was very sudden, very dramatic, and it led to immediate freezing of large parts of our planet. Many of you would probably immediately associate this full story with the theories and speculations about the polar shifts. And indeed, the orientation of many ancient buildings suggests that the magnetic pole of the Earth could have been somewhere in Greenland at some point in the past. But now a whole lot new research and information is available on topics that are probably related to these events. These new pieces of information could help us clarify when did all this happen and what was the cause of it. In the year 1835, the New York newspaper, The Herald, tells us about the President Jefferson, who sent a special team in Alaska to inquire on account of reports of mammoths. The team returned and informed him that the Eskimos are still hunting mammoths, and they even have special weapons for that purpose only. And this is not the only instance where the existence of such specialized weapon is reported. A similar report was published in the year 1899 by a traveler in Alaska. Why would the Eskimos bother to design and manufacture specialized weapons for animals that was supposedly not seen around for quite a few thousands of years at that time? In that same year, the McClellan's magazine published an article about the death of the last woolly mammoth in Alaska. The ambassador of the Austrian Emperor Sigismund Gerberstein visited the areas of nowadays Russia in the middle of the 16th century. He wrote down some notes on the fauna of the country that he saw. He mentioned that a great variety of birds and beasts reside in Siberia. And amongst the other wild animals like foxes, wolves and polar bears, he listed the mammoths as well. If the official version of history was correct, people at that time should have had no clue at all that such animals even existed. But that's not at all the case. They are again and again mentioned in the literature about Siberia throughout the centuries. And not only the name mammoth is used, but also the name Ves, that means the mammoths had also a local colloquial name. And they were not mentioned as some rare disappearing species, but just on the contrary, herds of them were roaming around, and even their behavior pattern was recorded. For example, when they were playing around or wrestling, it was mentioned that they would make large holes in the ice, probably in the surfaces of the frozen rivers or lakes. In the 19th century, while the famous author Turgenev writes about his travels in Siberia, he makes the note that somebody's boots were made, it seems, out of mammoth skin or fur. How would he know? How does mammoth fur look like? According to mainstream history at that time, all mammoth information was extremely scarce. There was only one skeleton available somewhere in England, and there should have been no clue how the fur would look like. And also Turgenev was writing his travel diary with the intention to publish it. Why would he make such a mention when his readers, his audience, wouldn't even understand what he meant? If this was just some literary, figurative, flowery speech, he would use the comparison, for example, of the elephants. They were well known at that time to his audience in Russia. Most likely, still at those times, the general people, simple people, knew how mammoth leather or fur would look like, because there are, and there were even the past even more artifacts made out of it in the local museums in Siberia. This sledge and few pairs of shoes being an example. Jack London also writes about an incident when somebody in Alaska meets a strange animal which, according to the description, corresponds absolute 100% to the description of a mammoth. The writer Gorodkov mentions the mammoths as existing animals and mentions also their local name Ves in year 1911. Mammoth sightings continue till nowadays. The accounts are numerous, especially amongst the indigenous semi-wild tribes. They have, in many cases, there are proper separate words for mammoths. For example, obda is one of them in their languages. They say in the past they were moving in large herds, but nowadays the herds are much smaller and are seen very, very rarely. It's not only because the mammoths have lost their natural tropical habitat, it is also because of the systematic and comprehensive poisoning of our own planet that we have embarked on lately. Collectively, all large animals on the planet are basically dying off. There is a very good amount of very credible witness accounts dating as far as a few decades ago. In some cases, a group of men could observe full herd for, let's say, half an hour even. It's not a question of somebody seeing something brown in the forest and maybe it's a squirrel but he thinks it's a mammoth. No, it is not like this. The evidence is plentiful to confirm that mammoths are vanishing right now. We have also one video footage from the last century of a mammoth few others are not so clear, but this one is actually quite a good one. It was filmed a few decades ago. This is the less credible one. Actually, the mammoth meat is so well preserved and so fresh that in many cases the locals have been using it for food, just defrosting and eating it. The blood of the frozen animals still flows. And yet, when we read the comments of our learned scholars afterwards, they would always add something very wise, like, and that mammoth would be probably 40,000 years old. And the more thousands they add, the wiser it will sound, isn't it? And unsophisticated people will read it in the newspaper and will naively believe it. And what are those thousands of years based on? Well, if you find the words, probably or maybe, then it is pure fantasy. But even when they base it on some sort of dating, well, please see my episode on the credibility of their dating methods and forget how reliable as they are as such. Even more highly questionable are the conditions under which such tests are performed. One would usually imagine that you submit a sample and you get the result based on some sort of laboratory tests, right? No. You give a sample and it is mandatory that this sample is accompanied with your suggestions about how old is this and to which period should it belong. And then surprise, surprise, you are always right. That is the scenario in most cases, not all. In addition, mainstream penguins assure us that the distribution of the mammoth species was pretty much global, yet they're dug out now in very large numbers only in Siberia and in Russia. And just to give you a hint of the scale in which this is going on, let's mention that till now 1 million of their husks have been exported, and that is only since such a statistic is being recorded. So how much has been exported illegally and how much is still in Russia, and all that given in account that a very small fraction of these large mammoth graveyards has been excavated. And also one other point, these things they eat a lot. This is the menu of the elephant in the Moscow Zoo. This fellow, he eats well some 200 kilo per day. I mean, can we even imagine how much his big brother, the mammoth, would have eaten daily? And then multiply that for I don't know how many millions. Wow, that means that Siberia and also the northern European parts of Russia must have been really beautiful with amazing lush tropical greenery. And here comes the most interesting part. When did that happen? Where did this mass extinction of the mammoths occur? And why did ice take over such vast areas? All of a sudden, I'm not talking now about the last surviving mammoths. I'm talking about the really one-time big extinction that created those massive graveyards of millions of mammoths entangled with tropical trees. It did not happen thousands of years ago because the tribes, the indigenous tribes that now reside in those areas, they belong to the Mongoloid Asian race, but they remember very well that before them other type of people used to reside here. Mainstream penguins assure us that before the Asian tribes arrived there, There was just nobody because it was too cold. But the tribes themselves tell a completely different story. They tell us about people who resided there together with their large domestic herds of mammoths. Both mammoths and moose are repeatedly reported to be very friendly towards people and often behave still like domestic animals. As I mentioned, the sightings of mammoths during the last couple of centuries are numerous. I could not list them all, otherwise I would need a few episodes about it. But in many cases, it is clearly said that they would come and lick humans. They would, in other words, they were domesticated either by the survivors themselves or by tribes that were in touch with them. Because as the story and the legends end, the legends of those Asian, nowadays indigenous tribes, is that the previous inhabitants of that land were at war with some beings from other places in the universe, and they lost the war badly. They were swept away, destroyed by deadly weapons from the skies. And I must say that swept off is very much confirmed by the evidence. Everything was literally swept in a big pile, all the tropical greenery, the mammoths, and everything else. Of course, we don't know how many sweepings of this sort occurred, and probably there were many of them, because in the legends of indigenous people from all over the world, there are quite few episodes of this galactic war saga, and the sweepings were many, that's for sure. Then, but the fact that the Asian tribes still remember the times when the mammoths were domestic herds, that strongly suggests that they got extinct during the very last sweep. And luckily, we do have a data which will greatly help us establish more or less the correct time of the last sweeping. Also, the very state of preservation of the bodies of the mammoths, eatable flesh, flowing blood. Okay, I mean, things can last long when they are refrigerated, but 10,000 years, that's a bit of an extreme refrigeration. But now back to the main point, the time of the big ice sweeping. The thing is that the northern parts of Asia, and to some extent even Europe, where it's Siberia nowadays, northern Russia, you get only young forests. All of them are approximately 200 years old. I say approximately because even this dating with the rings is questioned by some people. There are cases in which they have cut the trees in their garden and they have found a different number of rings than expected, because in some cases they really knew when did they plant this particular tree. That's why I say approximately. But the thing is roughly, I don't know how much roughly, but the trees in these vast areas, they are only 200 years old, all of them. This is confirmed by a number of researchers. Many of them, many people have noticed this. It's not just one person concluding it somehow. You see some landscapes for comparison, but it is a well-established fact. It's beyond doubt. And they have a few tiny, minute islands of preserved forests where you get really old trees, like everywhere else on Earth. Which isolated small spots only prove that this species did exist there, and there was a pristine old forest here as well, but they're so small, everywhere else it's just clean, swept 200 years ago. You see, for example, in America, what size of trees people used to find? Well, they were growing in Siberia, in this Hyperborean region as well. Why don't we see them? What happened to them? Now this is from Canada, again, gigantic trees. And people were making a beautiful survivor-style architecture out of them. Now these are old photos from Russia. All trees same size. They started growing all of them together some 200 years ago. These are photos from the time when the Tunguska meteorite fell. Again, all trees same size and very, very young. Now the official explanation of this is really unconvincing. Of course, it is all blamed to the stupidity of the people in the past who destroyed their environment like this with axes completely. And whatever they could not complete because it would be impossible for the population to destroy their forest in such a manner. It is such a work for a supposedly non-populated region. They couldn't have done it even if the ants were armed with axis. So whatever the stupid people could not kill, and why? Then fires, of course, there must have been fires that killed it all, right? Well, a fire of such a magnitude, basically burning down a chunk of the earth the size of a continent 200 years ago, first of all, should have been somehow noticed by the people around. Somebody must have written something, but there is no such fire. And in addition, such fire would have left terrible ashes all over, right? There is nothing like that at all. Original fires, of course, do occur even nowadays in this area. Well, they call them natural, but they are not so much natural. They're always near the location of some company, and after that they do this and that. It's a long story anyway, so they're not so natural anyway. And they're much, much smaller. I mean, even fires that cannot compare with the size of a continent cause ecological disasters that are just of such a magnitude that the option of fire destroying all this 200 years ago, a single fire, it's just not possible. Then stupid people just cutting their forest and destroying the environment that they live in, well, I don't believe it. And even if somebody believes it, it's not possible to make. Just you cannot find that many people to be able to chop the forest in the span of a couple of years. So why is the official establishment selling us sheer lies? What's wrong, for example, telling us frankly we don't know? Actually, the badly tailored lies by themselves make one want to dig more and find out. It is a well-known fact, accepted by everybody, that during the Middle Ages the weather was considerably warmer than now. But how much warmer exactly, that's the question. For example, areas of Iceland that are now eternally covered by glaciers, on the old maps they appear green with thriving vegetable farms on them, on the spots of where now it's meters and meters of thick ice that never melts. Well, that's quite a dramatic change. Moreover, they have found remains of actual farms on the places that were marked on the maps. So it wasn't some sort of a fiction map or fantasy map. It was a real and not only one map. Also, I have been hearing quotes from an old British encyclopedia that says that in the Middle Ages Russia was the biggest exporter of pineapples. Well, if it was lush green and tropical at that time, the pineapples wouldn't be a surprise at all. After all, the landscape was supporting millions of mammoths with millions of tons of food per day. And here I would like to bring a new suggestion to those who are very much into polar shift theories. They usually try to find with them an explanation why the ice was a different place at certain point in time, but maybe there was no ice at all even. Possibly the full Earth was with the balanced and pleasant climate all over, and I base that on the facts about Iceland, which is pretty near to the old magnetic North Pole in Greenland. What we see on the ground, though, is radically different from what would have been the possible aftermath of a natural polar shift and the resulting calamities. after it. What we observe in reality are craters. Officially, these are meteorite craters, or although they don't look like such, some of them still have a radiation measurable coming from their center. Definitely not all of them, but that's natural because even Hiroshima and Nagasaki are now habitable places, although they were bombed in the not so far away past. By the way, those lines in the lakes, the blue lines, they are not natural formations. They are placed by Google Maps. I don't know why actually. But the point here are the trenches beside them. Officially, those are the traces of movements of ancient glaciers. Really, did the glaciers plow the earth in such a fashion? The width of one of these trenches is at least 1 kilometer. Some of them reach 5 kilometers in width. Just the low part, not two stripes next to each other, not low and high, only one of them. That is just gigantic. So gigantic that it doesn't look like an irrigation system. For example, if you remember in the episode about Africa, there was an irrigation system, but that was in human scale, you know, few meters size and things like that. This doesn't look like an irrigation at all. And of course, these are not glaciers. The glaciers, they follow the terrain that they move on. And although some of these trenches has been destroyed by agriculture, still it can be noticed in an area of nearly 2 million square kilometers. That's a lot, really a lot. And of course, it happens to be exactly where the Empire of the Survivors, Tartaria, was living its final days. No wonder why they disappeared like that without much trace after such a plowing. Now, it was Dimitar Melnikov who researched these trenches, and his conclusions are extremely interesting. For example, pay attention where these trenches end. Although they have been plowing the earth for hundreds of kilometers in a line, definitely that is seen on a Google map. For hundreds of kilometers, they just continue straight and nothing can stop them, mountains nor anything else. And at the very end, before they disappear, this is what you see. This is now a better map of that same location of these trenches. All of a sudden, just at the very end, they become wider and not parallel. Dmitry Melnikov actually suggests that these objects that were plowing our Earth were gigantic ice pieces, blocks. And at the end, they melted and formed what you see here at the end. If it was some other solid object, there should have been mountain at the end of the trenches, or it was withdrawn upstairs to the skies back after plowing the earth. That's also possible. Energy beams are another possibility. But the particular pattern here, yes, I would agree that it resembles maybe something indeed melted, and then there is a river at the end that has formed after this melting. Could be. Just try to imagine the size of the ice blocks or of anything else that could have left plow traces of 5 kilometers of width. That could not have been some sort of unbelievable meteorite shower as well, because if single meteorite broke into pieces, then there should have been an epicenter of no center is observed here. All the lines are always parallel. And in addition to that, meteorites, they come and land. They may have, you know, a few meters of movement on the surface of the earth, but scraping it in such a uniform manner for hundreds of kilometers in line, uninterrupted, that is one thing meteorites don't do. And how do these events tie to the date of 200 years ago? Well, in many ways actually. First of all, those young forests grow on a very young soil that would look like a soil that is really about 200 years young. There is no below, it's just clay. In addition to that, again, Dmitry Melnikov has a very interesting research that some cities that were there in the map are completely absent in those areas now. It seems to have been densely populated, and now no trace of these cities and forts. Okay, maybe the forts are destroyed, but the other forts of this time, at least some sort of earthworks remain from them or something like that. Nothing, absolutely blank. And then another thing in this area, these people were noticing years ago, even when this information about Tartaria was not even out. Well, how come all the graves date for the last 200 years? Well, that's odd. So what? People used not to die before that, or what? And then in the previous episodes, I showed the star fort under a thick layer of clay cities, under thick layers, 1 story high of clay. Now, that's not only in this area. There seem to be quite a few cities far outside this area, and they seem to be buried more selectively. And it seems they're giving a good frisure not only to the science, so-called science of history, but also to other sciences. Before they show them to the public, they send them to the beauty parlor for a long time. For example, they always assure us how the layers represent very long periods of the history of our planet, and then we see a single tree crossing layers that should have needed millions of years to form. And it's not just one, it's a full category of them. And these oaks are from the seashore in Wales, England. Some sort of storm carried away the whatever debris was on the top of them and exposed them. Well, oaks don't grow in the sea, that's for sure. They don't like it there. And these are not some ancient oaks because they haven't rotten. Yet one more proof that the face of our planet can change much faster and in a much more sudden manner than we are led to believe by the so-called science. They're always talking about millions of years and gradual shifts. This is Nairin Kala, yet another one out of the countless examples I've been showing in so many episodes of selectively buried under clay stuff. This is not small, this is the size of a village, and the archaeologists now need to dig inside the fort couple of meters to reach to the actual buildings. How did that thick layer end up there? Did they carry it with donkeys and baskets up the steep hill to cover up a full village with it? And another example, Kopovskaya Campus, that is not far away from St. Petersburg. There used to be a river. That what you see here on the front was a sort of a bridge actually. And that's how it was on the old maps. Now, there is no river now. And the situation with the bodies of water around is radically different. The official explanation is that, Earth rises, but with what speed? If this was so much lower just 1 or 2 centuries ago, then St. Petersburg must have been underwater because it's next to it. So again and again, the face of our Earth seemed to have changed radically in very recent times. And we are being sold all kind of bamboozling, silly explanations to an extent that every sensible person would start wondering what's going on here. Are we taken like very seriously for a ride again by the historians? To summarize, it is entirely possible that in the not so far away past, just 300 short years ago, our planet still had a pleasant climate all over, or mostly, and then these ice caps appeared as a result of the nuclear winter scenario, and that effect could have been multiplied by ice blocks that landed on the surface in uh, thousands of them. Maybe I didn't get all the details right straight away. This is open to discussion, and later on in this video I will suggest a way how we together find out all the details correctly. And also I think the mammoths are represented in a very misleading way in the art, that is the illustration in the textbooks. Look at this half monkey man causing pain to the poor animal. Who are these monkey men? Are they the same monkeys who built the St. Petersburg marvelous masterpieces that we still can't replicate? No, these are actually the monkeys that they want to turn us after watching such illustrations, causing pain to everything we can see around. We hear just the opposite from the indigenous people. The mammoths were our pet domesticated animals. And maybe they kept that memory through the centuries, and that is why the reports of the indigenous people is that they're very loving and cuddling animals. Now the Survivor series already has quite few episodes, and again I have shown that there is something profoundly wrong with what we are taught to believe to be our history. Well, time has come to remember our true origin. Or at least those of us whose ability to think is not yet buried under thick layers of clay and have interest in such things have the opportunity to do it now. Unfortunately, very often I can say that there is definitely something wrong, but I'm able to give much less answers than I wish I would have been able to. And the good news is that you can help recover this lost history of ours in a very fun way. Anybody, really anybody, can learn remote viewing. Of course, for some people it will happen much faster, but still it is not some special ability that it is required for it. There are many courses available, especially in America for it, but also you can learn yourself at home for free, absolutely for free. And I would be willing to help you in this process and at the same way use the results. There are so many targets that need to be explored, and I don't know any good remote viewers who anyway would be willing to contribute so much work for free. But even the information extracted by absolute beginners can be of some use, and the thing is that the lack of quality can be compensated by some extent with the quantity. That means that I will give, I hope I can make this happen, maybe I will. I will provide blind targets, means you are given just a number or a code and you don't know what you are remote viewing. And I give this target to, let's say, 50 people. And since I expect them to be beginners, many of them will see nothing, many of them will see something irrelevant, but let's say out of the 50, 20 will see something real. And the proof will be that 20 of the stories will match absolutely unrelated people who don't even know what they're remote viewing, so it makes some sense. And participation in such a project would actually help you for free in testing. it will be a test for you. In the beginning, you will not know what to do, but gradually, as you train yourself, you will be surprised to find out that you see actually things about the targets that you don't know even what they are. And after that, when I tell you what they are, when it becomes public, it will be quite interesting for you as well. Here on this page, you can find free information on what is remote viewing all about and how anybody can gradually learn this magical art. Or if you know any individual or organization or anything that would be willing to contribute to volunteer for such a remote viewing projects, please ask them. I have given the details that I just told you also in a written form on my website in the section called Get Involved. I have no clue if when will I start organizing such a project. It depends on when there are enough volunteers available. But this is my email, and you can apply to such volunteering. And once I start making such projects, if ever, I will let you know. And this morning I received a very insightful note from a YouTube viewer, an additional information concerning the last episode about the star forts. So he made me aware that those Tibetan towers are also, many of them are actually star-shaped. They have been also long suspected to be actually power stations, although it hasn't been proven yet. But certainly they are a valuable piece in the puzzle of the mystery of the star forts.